Hello and welcome to Power in Perspective. I am April. This is Aaron, and today we have the ever lovely Tam. Am I going the right way?
Nope, other direction.
Yeah,
There you
go.
Hello.
Today we're talking about. It's so hard to put into words, actually, what we're talking about. We're talking about like modesty and like where it came from, and should women have to cover up, and do we sexualize the female form too much? All those things. So if y'all can think of one word that describes what we're talking about, feel free to put it in the box, because I've been thinking a long time and I can't think of one.
Well, as we discussed before, when I saw this on the calendar and it said body coverage, I thought we were talking about tattoos.
Oh yeah.
I thought we were going to be talking about body art. So for a long time I was confused.
Right?
Yeah.
I put body coverage because I didn't know what to put. I was told when I first brought up this topic, I was told that using the word promiscuous to describe what I'm saying is offensive. Because
I was thinking about the opposite. It's interesting. I was thinking about it from the perspective of the purity culture that's like this like ultra controlling side of it. So to me, what we're talking about is kind of like that piece, I guess.
Oh yeah, and where it comes from, totally. So really quick, I'll share my perspective. I grew up, and I think my would you say our mom is kind of like relatively prudish?
Yeah, I mean, definitely modest is a word I would use to describe our mother.
Okay. You were gonna say something else.
No, I got bit by a cat. That's what that face
was.
Oh. Just trying to keep it on the DL. So much for that.
But I grew up and was very body conscious of covering things up. There's a picture of my bachelorette party where I had a little bit lower top than I would normally wear, and there's a picture of me pulling it up because someone is trying to like pull it down so I could look like sexier. Yeah, so I have always been very conscious of that. And in my adult years, I found myself being judgmental of others who weren't like me, which is common for people to do. But like, and then I started thinking, well, where does that come from? Where does that judgment come from? And all of these things. And is it right? Is it wrong? Is it right? Why do I think they have to cover up? Because there's a lot of cultures that don't cover up. So That's my perspective. What are you thinking, Aaron?
I'm pretty much the same. And I've grown to, like, I've always been, like, we didn't really sit around the house very much, like, in anything other than like full clothing. Like, I've never even been really comfortable in pajamas, like being around people, even. So I
Where is
just shorts and like
I'm feeling very uncomfortable with your pajama choices. If you are not like, I could wear my pajamas to 7-Eleven.
well, no, yeah, and I wouldn't be comfortable with it, not because of what it is, but because of what it. I don't know. It's taken a weird. It took a weird turn on me here. Uh, but no, just like not being like formally dressed, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not necessarily related, but to feel like I wouldn't go to Walmart looking any different than I would go to work.
Okay.
And
I
I'd be
see.
very damn it, sorry, I'm getting attacked. Give me a minute.
This has never happened,
No, it has
guys.
not.
The cat
No,
is always there in every
she's
episode.
normally
This has never
well
happened.
behaved, but she's right at my leg and she's just going at me.
Channeling something.
And I find that I value modesty, probably for the reason for us being raised the way we were. I don't know that
Yeah.
it necessarily represents like specific values or anything to me. Um, sorry, I need to deal with this.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna shoot it to Tam. So that's what we're talking about, guys. This is so funny. That's what we're talking about. So Tam, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your general views on the topic as of now?
Yeah, so my name is Tam. Um, I it's interesting because I was also raised very similarly, but over the past couple of years have really been digging really deeply into like what do I believe and why? And I'll call it like I sometimes call it of things that I was raised with that don't any longer really ring true for me or resonate as I've spent more time with them. And this topic specifically is one that like fits right in there. So when you invite, like when you kind of put the question out there, it really kind of sparked something for me because it's something I've just spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I've also spent a lot of time like reclaiming for myself, like what do I really want to believe? What do I choose? And how do I choose to also just like show up in the world as me in a way that feels authentic? So um, for me, that's like where we talked about like who gets to choose. That's really what it comes down to me. It comes down to like really allowing each person to have that freedom to self-express in a way that feels good to them and creating safety around that. I think that, as I was kind of pondering on this earlier today, I was like, the biggest thing for me is like, how do we create safety so that a woman or a man or anyone, any human, can really just show up in the world and dress however they want, whatever in whatever way really lights them up and brings them joy or like feels really good in their body, and be safe to do so. So it's a little bit of my perspective.
I agree. I think safety is a big thing. Um, it's not what I typically think about, but it does relate back to then, right? The sexualization of women and how we teach our daughters to dress appropriately to not attract male attention, right? Versus, and this is not something obviously I am saying. This is a thing now.
General.
Instead of teaching our sons, that's not the purpose of a body.
Yeah. Yeah, that for me was a big piece of it. I was totally raised with this idea that I'm responsible in some way for a man's morality. Like it was like that heavy, right? And I just don't think that's true anymore. Like I really don't. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's true. I don't think uh it doesn't honor the sovereignty of either the men or the women in our culture, right? And I think it's just a really awful place to choose from, like, oh, I have to dress a certain way to not like make that person want to do something inappropriate to me, to not make that person want to my boundaries or take advantage of me. Like that doesn't seem like how it should work in theory. And so I've just been really, yeah, spent a lot of time just thinking about like how messed up that is really, and how to like create a different perspective of empowerment, you know, for like I have ownership of my body. And you know what I've found too is like, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, because it sounds like we were raised in a very similar kind of culture, household. Um, you know, I've actually felt like I didn't have the tools to create healthy boundaries for myself or to like really stand up for myself, because instead I was just taught to like avoid certain areas, right? Like just stay away from there as much as possible. Just don't dress that way. Just don't, you know, be in this situation where this might come up. But then you don't actually have the tools,
Yeah.
right, to like navigate that when and if and probably whenever that actually comes up. So
That's so true. I tell my kids that all the time because their dad is very, very strict in what they can do. And I'm like, well, if you never date, you won't know how to date
Yeah.
when you're older, when I'm not even there, right? I'd rather you date now with, not with me. Like, I'm not going to go everywhere.
Heavily supervised.
I'm, yes. Like, I'd rather you date now so we could talk about it. I'd rather you use your phone now and get on social media so I can help guide you in appropriate usage. Because if you never do it, then how do you know? So, yeah, like, since we brought up children, my oldest daughter used to be super modest. We're talking it's 100 degrees outside. We're going on a hike and the girl has a sweater on. Like it was like I say so bad, but it was so extreme that I even thought maybe she was cutting and investigated. She was not. But now I just saw a picture of her on what's that? Instagram, and she's got a little half tank top going. I was like, I don't know how I feel about. I know how
It's
I
jarring.
should feel. I should, right? I should feel like, go girl, you be you. But also, I'm like, Sage Nellikike, you need to cover up. Like, that's what's in my head. What are your thoughts, Aaron? Since you were so rudely interrupted by a cat cat.
Well, no, I mean, and when you talk about safety, I just have a question more than anything. Like, obviously, safety from assault is an easy safety thing. But is there a desire to be safe from judgment, as people who are inherently judgmental? Obviously, this is not something I really have to deal with in my daily life. But is that one of the angles, is like to be safe from judgment from society as a whole, or is it just accepted that that's not kind of going away?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I don't know if we can ever be safe from judgment. I feel like that's a safety we have to create inside of ourselves, but more kind of like to April's point from the beginning, where like we're teaching all of our children about the sovereignty and sacredness of bodies, and like about consent, and about how, you know, how to really give each other just like space to be. I don't know. To me, it's like we can really only start where we're at, right? And like in the little bubble that we have some kind of agency in and we have some kind of influence in. So for me, a lot of it is about teaching my kids and modeling for them. Like, yeah, I mean, it would be lovely to live in a world where like we're not judged by how we dress, and to like really see that a woman who is like empowered in her sexuality is actually a really powerful, like healthy, whole like woman, right? But until then, I think from a more practical standpoint, really just that like, yeah, just that honoring of boundaries, I think is a big one.
That when you said that, I pictured, and I'm gonna be offensive this whole time, guys. I don't know other words to say, okay? But like, if I picture a scantily clad woman, right? My first thought is not, ooh, she's an empowered, like, bomb ass bitch. That's not my first thought. My first thought is like, ooh, she has got some daddy issues and like needs to work through some stuff and doesn't love herself. Like that is my thought.
Mm-hmm. And I think like the thing with these kinds of thoughts is like just like noticing and being like, oh, where does that come from? And like, is that true for me now? Like this is something I teach in my work in Reclaim Your Space, which is a community that's all about you know, I say clearing clutter to open up to flow, but what that really just means is like reclaiming sovereignty and reclaiming like our connection to home. And so it started out there in like the physical space of like what home is like, because I trained as an interior designer and I worked in home remodeling for a long time. So it like started out there, but very quickly it became obvious that like this is our home. And so when we start talking about like how to reclaim space here and how to really come home to ourselves, when those thoughts come up that you're kind of like, oh, do I really believe that? It's like just like a moment to be like, oh, let me just check in. And like, and so I teach this process of like, you know, like, oh, who said so is the first question I ask myself. Like, who said so? And why? There's often like a reason, right? Like our moms taught us that because they were trying to keep us safe in the best way they knew how, I think at the time. Um, for example, or they had, you know, in my case, they also had like religious beliefs about it, right? And like other kind of layers of cultural and and familial beliefs. But then it's like, okay, why? And then is it true for me now? You know, that then I kind of test every thought that comes through that feels like a little iffy. Like I test it through those questions, you know, and it's pretty revealing because then it's like, oh, I don't know. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that's still true for me, and sometimes it's like, huh, I'm open to something different. Like I'm open to believing something different there. And a lot of times, you know, that's why I love what you're creating here about. Like it's just sometimes we don't have a different perspective because we've never heard a different perspective, right? Like we've never even just been exposed to like another thought about it. And so, you know, I have a few different mentors and people who I have like learned from where I feel like, oh, that's a different perspective that I was never taught about the reclamation of our sexuality as women and our power in that, you know, and that's become a very important focus for me in my own life. So.
And as we all begin to change and as people feel more comfortable being themselves, I think even the people on the outside of that, like who aren't doing that work, will gradually begin to change. I think it all comes down to thinking about like how it all started. Like we clearly didn't have clothes like when we came to this earth. However you believe that we like evolved or came, like it didn't start with clothes. So when they came over to, especially to the United States, because there's a lot freer countries than us with regards to dress and whatever, people covering up. Like I think of like of the French or Latin America and Latin communities are very okay with, I just feel like they embrace their sexuality as a whole more. And so they're very okay with it. But we are Protestant based society, you know, in general in the United States. That's what's happened. So it's religious based, right?
Mhm.
And then I think about, so okay, so it's religious based. So why did they believe that? Anyone have enough Bible knowledge to know why women are valued more when they're covered up?
Well, like I said, from my experience, and I was raised in a very conservative Bible teaching kind of religion. It was very much about morality, right? So this idea of impure thoughts was that like if you had lustful thoughts about a woman, it was as bad as like cheating on your partner with another person, right? It was equivalent in terms of the sinfulness of it. And so to keep yourself pure, you shouldn't have sexual thoughts about a woman. And so then for some reason, it seems, I mean, it's interesting. um, then the kind of burden fell on the woman to protect the men from having impure thoughts by dressing modestly. At least that's in the, my experience of that culture has been that.
Yeah.
And so then they put in all these rules in place for the women to dress in a certain way to not distract the men from their spiritual pursuits and from their purity and from their, godliness and all that, which is, interesting. I mean, I think if you go further back, it's really, really fascinating to kind of start to look at, and I'm not like an expert on this, but I just have like little nuggets. There were all of these beautiful cultures of women who were very in touch with nature, who were very in touch with their cycles, who were very connected to mysticism and magic, and there was a lot of sexuality and sensuality woven into those cultures. So I think in some ways this was also a response of the Christian church, the patriarchal kind of structure that came in to take like the place of, or that kind of like over kind of took the matriarchal societies. And it was another way of keeping women more disconnected from their power and from their wisdom and from their bodies and from nature and all that, I think. I was recently learning a little bit about some ancient cultures where the image of the snake was revered as a symbol of the goddess and of Mother Earth, and so it was worshipped. And there was also something about the apple. And then if you look at the first story in the Bible, they take that symbology and they basically make it really bad. Right? Yeah. They make it like the beginning of everything bad that happened to humanity. And so to me, it's just a very interesting moment of like looking at like, why did they do that? Where did that come from? And it is very much the story of the oppressor, right? There's a dominant culture that came in and oppressed another culture. So
yeah. I don't want to speak over you, Aaron. Did you want to speak?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you talk about like the religious and the impure thoughts and stuff, it's hilarious to me because I get what they're saying, whatever. But what's hilarious to me is you're not going to stop a man's impure thoughts because you think back when women started showing their ankles, ooh, and men would have impure thoughts because they saw a freaking ankle, right? And then you think, oh, then the dresses went up and you could see their calves. And there's even references in movies like, ooh, look at that, right? And sexualizing a calf for God's sake. So it's just insane to me to think that like dressing like that. And this is what I have to remind myself too. Like when I see someone dressed like that, am I sexualizing them because of what has been like told to me and what's been passed down to me, right? And we didn't grow up in a religious household per se. There were many religions that were gone through. Like we we were kind of religious experimenters. So we did many of them, but I never really did them. We just I feel
chaos.
like we were just learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Taste testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think you can control a man's lustful thoughts. And it's like immersion therapy to me almost. Like so I think of the indigenous like Amazonian cultures, which someone from that culture. Because today I was on the phone talking with someone and he was very I brought up our topic and then I brought up the Amazonian culture, like women walk around with no tops on all the time. And there's not lust happening all over the place. And he's like, well, have you ever talked to an Amazonian man? I'm like, shut up. I guess I'm assuming because it's not a topic that they don't. If anyone knows one, I would like to talk to them. Yeah, but they see boobies all the time. So boobies are just part of the body, right? Boobies haven't been sexualized. Ooh, I wonder if that translates to sex. Do they still? Yeah, because they are what's that called? Stimulating.
zone.
Erogenous zone. Yes, thank you.
And on the other
Erogenous.
side of your same point, I actually found an article that was poorly written, so I don't have any other quotes. But it was quoting Mayim Bialik in the title, saying, "If you think modest clothing protects you from sexual harassment, you need to listen to Muslim women." And the article is basically the opposite of your point, but to the same conclusion, where it doesn't matter the environment or the stimulus, that the behaviors are still the same.
Yeah.
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 And I think, what I think about it, comes to some like very extreme kind of conclusions that I'm playing with. And I always hold them very loosely, right? So I let them be playful. Um, I think that the original, like, if anything was if we talk about original sin, like I read this quote somewhere and it really stuck with me. And it was like the original sin was when we were like, when our sexuality was taken from us, right? Whenever we made sex bad in general, like for men or for women, for all of us, it was like, and put so much shame around it, it got really funky. Like it just got really funky. And I think if you think about like, you know, cultures, religions where the priests are celibate, supposedly, there are like all of these really awful things that tend to happen, right? Because it's just not, I don't think, the natural way of being. Not that someone can't choose that from an empowered place and like from a healthy place if they want to, but it's like there's something different about just making it wrong. Anything I think that we start to shove into the shadows and into the shame space starts to get really funky and it comes out in weird sideways and
100% agree.
usually damaging.
That's such a good point. And I think what has happened, I was thinking as you talk about like body shame, is that it has contributed a lot to that. Because I was thinking, like men versus women. I'm about to all TMI you guys to death, so get over it. But I am not comfortable walking around naked like at all. Like I don't even look at myself in the mirror when I get out of the shower. Like I hold myself and cover myself even if nobody's in the room. Like, but I would say 99% of the guys I've ever dated, which are not that many, okay? But I would say that I just know what y'all are thinking. But 99% of them have absolutely no problem walking around naked. Like free for all, like here I am. And I'm like sit on the couch naked. Sometimes they spend days naked. I'm like, ah! Like just the thought of that like horrifies me.
Horrifies me too.
Yes, because we've been trained and raised that, like you said, like our bodies are bad.
Right, right. Which is not the same as I choose to cover my body for because I want to. Not really. Like it is and it's not, right? There's like a
Yeah.
deeper layer there, and that's where I think it gets really more interesting to kind of dive into. Because the other thing I was thinking about, and I'm glad you like the Muslim women, is like I also believe that you should be allowed to cover up as much of your body as you choose. And, you know, hopefully, like, I mean, I hope that each person can like be making that choice from a place of their own sovereignty and consent, right? And I don't know if like in all cultures that's always possible. Just like in our culture, like I wasn't allowed to wear a crop top ever growing up. Last summer, for the first time, I went to this thrift shop and I just bought all crop tops for the whole summer. And that's what I wore. And it was like, am I allowed to do this? I'm a mom of 3 kids, right? I'm a grown up now. Uh, is it weird? But it felt so good in my body. So I was like, I'm just going to do it. And then my daughter saw and she's like, oh, I want to have like I can't remember what she called it now. It was like a tiny shirt or something. And so she like took one of her shirts and she like cut it and she's 6, right? But like she cut the bottom of it and she was wearing it. And I was just like, I want her to be able to choose. And then recently, so interesting, like because I also like I'll wear a 2-piece swimsuit, but it took a while of being a mom to be able to reclaim that and be like, oh, actually I get to choose and this feels better in my body. Um, I bought her a swimsuit. It happened to be a 1-piece, and she's like, "Oh, I like this better because it doesn't show as much of my body." And I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting, right?" So it's like, is that an internal thing that's coming from like inside her, this desire, or is it like she heard someone say something about someone else and then
Yeah.
internalized it. And I'm just very curious because I here at home, like my kids will still run around naked, my younger ones, and that's really important to me to like protect that because I never had that, and it feels like something I don't want them to have shame about their bodies. So
Yeah. I when you're talking about the crop top, I just had like realizations like I would never even have a bra strap showing. If a bra strap was showing, I thought that was super inappropriate. You nothing like see-through. But this last summer, I have this one shirt where I wear like a little, what do they call them now? They, what did my daughter call them? It's not a sports bra. It's like fancier, I guess. Anyway, but it's okay, I guess, for people to see it. Like that's a thing. I don't know. But I have a shirt and it's open in the back. So I went and bought all these see-through shirts that I now wear these like they look like sports bras, but not tankinis. Gosh bless it. Anyway, and so I wear see-through shirts. I also sweat like a pig. And so now I can wear things other than tank tops. Like I can wear a shirt and it's see-through so air can breathe. But yeah, I just realized that's part of my show my body journey. Just wait, I'm coming out, people.
yeah,
One day you're gonna be like, April, put your clothes on. No, I doubt that will go that far, but
It'll just be that one time you're at the Free of the Nipple rally.
yeah. Monique, thank you. Bralette.
bralette. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Monique. I appreciate the save. Steven said something. Is it safety is 99? Oh, he's gonna make us angry, isn't he? Should I read it?
Go nuts.
Safety is 99% prevention. Is it safe to enter a BLM protest wearing a MAGA hat? Is it safe to walk alone at night, scantily clad? Well, first of all, it should. You know what, Stephen? I'm about to pull Tam on you.
So mad.
Because why should a person feel physically threatened by wearing, first of all, why would someone who wears a MAGA hat go to BLM protest? But that's not the point. Maybe you can embrace both. No, erase that judgment as well. I feel like you can embrace both. You can embrace both. But you shouldn't be anything you wear. You shouldn't feel at risk to be physically harmed.
Yes, I agree.
That was a long way to take it to there, but you know.
Well, and to his point a little bit is that there are some things in life you can't avoid, right? Like if you go swimming with sharks, there's a certain risk, right? Part of life is risk management and deciding what risks to take. So, I mean, to that point, like, is it worth that risk to be in a neighborhood where there is has been a rash of rapes, or go to that bar where women are being drugged? Do you consider that when going into those circumstances? Are you at least aware of it, and does it account into, am I going to go there at all, or if I'm going to behave differently while I'm there?
That's a good point. That's a good point. And I think if I always look at the like puppies and rainbows and fairies scenario. It's a societal problem. It's so we can make our individual choices, but society is still out there. So when you talk about safety and prevention, you have to acknowledge that is still occurring, right? Like you're still going to get stares if your boobies are out. Just because you change you doesn't mean you change society. But maybe if enough yous change, society will change.
Yeah, and I think like to me, there's a really important piece around like shining more light of awareness on the subconscious, like the deeper belief beneath the thought, right? So, okay, if you're saying are you going to go walking in the dark, scantily clad, whatever? Like, what's the belief beneath that, right? And where does a shift need to happen? Is it like, oh, women should dress differently, or is it like men should be taught not to rape women? Right? Like, where are we focusing? And like, yes, as an individual and as a woman, you can mitigate your risks. But again, it's like for so long the focus is still on the wrong piece of it, I think.
And him
Yeah.
saying that proves that. Like, is it safe to walk alone at night scantily clad? Stephen, it's not safe to walk alone at night if you're a female. It's not safe to walk alone at night if you're gay. You know what I mean? Like, these are the things we deal with no matter what we wear. I'm small and I never dress scantily clad. And it's not safe for me to walk alone at night, although I do. But still.
Right. Right. And so there's a deeper problem there, and it's not about kind of how we dress, I don't think. I think it's a deeper problem.
Yeah.
And I think that if we keep distracting the focus onto how and it happens, right? I mean, this victim blaming situation like happens all the time, and it's just infuriating because it's like, why are we focused on what she was wearing and we're not focused on the fact that like this group of men is allowed to just like do whatever
physically
they want.
attack people. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like I always say, the right to swing your fist ends where my face begins. Like, you can go do all the things you want, you can look all you want, but you have no right to touch no matter what I'm wearing. Even if I was naked, although I think that might deter you more if I walked naked down the street.
Maybe, but maybe that's maybe that's
everybody's got their thing that they like, right? Maybe you like short, old, chubby women.
So it's reminding me of this experience I had. So a few times I've gone to, there's a beach near here where it's clothing optional, swimsuits optional. And one of the really beautiful things about going there is that when you look around, it's like I feel like there's this misconception that like only people who have the perfect picture, like patriarchy perfect body would go there, but it's not. It's just such a beautiful range of humans in all shapes and sizes and colors and orientations and everything, who are just each really confident in their body and just feel really comfortable in their body. And there's like, it's really beautiful. It's just really beautiful and really healing to see that.
I see that even with people, even when they wear bathing suits, because I am not comfortable, and I see them and they're larger and they've got their swimsuit on and they're rocking it and they look amazing, and yet I look at me and I'm like why don't I look like that when I have a bathing suit on? I look like, right? Like, yeah. We have a lot of top optional places here in Vegas. I've been told that at the beginning of the night, it starts with what some people think are just paid women who have their top off. But once the alcohol gets flowing, everybody just,
it's Wild Wild West.
Freeze
so
the nips.
To speak, yeah.
Yeah. What do you call it again? Nip? No. What's that tagline?
Free the nipple?
Oh, yeah, but that's not as catchy. That doesn't sound catchy.
I'm not on the marketing department. It's not.
Oh.
This one isn't on me. So much is, but this one's not. So, go ahead.
What?
Okay, so some of the stuff that I do have that I was able to find good quotes for and such was around same-sex aggression when it came to modesty. And there was, let's see, an initial experiment with 79 female and 63 male participants found that people expected women to direct more veiled aggression, such as acting bitchy toward another woman when she was revealingly dressed versus modestly dressed. And the other one here is,
that's a good word, revealingly dressed. I'm keeping that in my
dressed. It's not hard. It's not easy to get out. New research in social psychological and personality science provides evidence that women strategically dampen signals of sexual permissiveness and desirability to avoid provoking intersexual aggression. In other words, the study suggests that women dress defensively by wearing less revealing outfits when encountering other women. So what what part of this whole thing is also the same-sex interaction causing judgments and causing these reactions
I've
to
never.
immodesty,
But you know,
I guess.
I think that kind of goes with your question before too. Like when you go out, like, right, there's gonna be judgments.
Well, but so a
I
part of
never.
another part of the article was talking about like attractive women when meeting new female friends will tend to dress more demurely to not create larger gaps in
Intimidate.
between. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same goes for the other way around. If a woman feels that she's less attractive, she will try to dress more provocatively in those interactions with other females to try to, I'm guessing, to level out. It doesn't really get into it specifically, but it seems like the idea is to level out the interaction to some extent. Is that does
Interesting.
that do you think that interaction has some impact on society as a whole and how we start to approach the idea of modesty in the age that we're living in?
Yeah, I have a lot to say, but keep
Oh,
going.
Go ahead.
no, you go. Yeah, you
Lots
go.
to say about this. So I've been thinking a lot about this past year of like how and spending a lot of time in circles of women who are really on the same page of like shifting out of the competition paradigm and into a celebration paradigm, into a collaboration paradigm, into like as I rise and become more powerful and empowered and you do the same, like we rise together. And that is a huge, huge piece of my vision for the world for sure. And I totally still feel this exact thing that you described. Like I've noticed myself if I go to meet a woman for the first time, I'm trying to gauge how confident is she in herself and how powerful does she feel in herself so that I can either fully be myself and just show up like me, or do I have to like modify that? So not necessarily just in how I dress, but just like overall, like I find this dynamic at play. Like I feel safer if she's really confident in herself because then I can be myself and she won't feel threatened by it, right? And I see that play out a lot. And so the places where I have found that I, get along best is with other powerful women who are not afraid to be powerful women, who are not afraid to speak up about their thoughts and ideas about things, who are comfortable in just the way that they present in the world. And, so much of these really oppressive kind of paradigms and judgments and things, like you said, like they started from, I think, like this patriarchal system that was men over women, but we've kind of adopted them and now we continue to play them out woman to woman. And it's really, it's heartbreaking to me, but it's what's definitely real in terms of the shaming and the, when I like debating, like, can I wear a two-piece bathing suit now that I have three kids? Like, it wasn't like, oh, are men going to think this is inappropriate? It was like, are the other moms going to judge me? Right. Which is just icky. That's my powerful conclusion. It's just icky.
It's icky.
I
That's
don't like
that's
it.
the kind of conclusions I like to make. When you're talking about what you do when you meet a woman for the first time, I now have a very clear idea of why I don't have very many friends. Because I don't do any of that. Like, I have never had this issue before ever in my life. I never think, like, what is the other person wearing or who does she be? Or, like, I just show up. And that's probably why I am perceived as aggressive sometimes.
I mean, I say power to you because I mean, who wants to be in relationships and in friendships and in circles of people where you can't just be yourself and just show up? I don't anymore. So it took
Yeah.
me a while to get there, but that's pretty awesome.
And we could do a whole episode on mommy shaming. Let me tell you, the two times I have been mommy shamed have both been times from people who don't even have children trying to mommy shame me. Um, Stephen made a good point. Not a good point. A point that I'm sorry. Stephen usually makes good points, so I got confused for a second. He
The
made a
shame is real
point that
now.
I want to address. He said, replace scantily clad with swastika nipple tassels. You should be free to do it, but others may not agree and get aggressive. The reason why I think that is not applicable is because a swastika represents a hate group. And I always say there are good and bad people in every group, except hate groups. Like hate groups are a special category all themselves. And because that represents a hate group, you still should be able to walk down the road without worry of physical harm. In in the United States of America, I feel like you should be able to wear your swastika nipple things and
I mean, I think it comes down to like what you're saying before, like swing your fist in the air, but don't hit me in the face. Like me dressing in a certain way is not like saying anything aggressive about any other group of people. It's not promoting hatred or violence towards any other group of people. It has nothing to do with anybody else except for me.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's a completely separate thing. And
yeah,
and I
because
think that's where people get very confused about like freedom of speech and like all this shit. It's like, no, I'm not being violent towards you by dressing the way that I want to dress.
yeah,
That's
and
not the
a swastika is a notoriously violent symbol. Um, but that was a good try, Stephen. He he also says judgment has a positive side too. The way you dress should attract the companionship you desire, right?
no. What if I just want to dress a way that I want to dress because I just enjoy how it feels in my body, right? This isn't about attracting anything. I think that's just, again, like a misconception that's definitely out there is like, oh, you're dressing a certain way because you want like to find someone to fuck you. And it's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't. I
And
just like my body.
this brings me to what I wanted to bring up anyway. Thank you, Stephen. Is intent. Like, because there were some discussions I had with some other people. I don't know if Aaron, we talked about it, but is the intent, oh no, remember that post that was on Facebook by someone I follow who is very religious, and she was like the demoralization of females or something, and it's as she was more and more scantily
Oh,
clad,
that's the one you should.
whatever. Yeah. So, but the comment was that women who dress are women who are scantily clad, their intent is to sexually arouse men. And that's their issue. That's this group of people's issue, right? And so does intent matter? Of course it doesn't, but doesn't on all levels, the surface level, the deep level, whatever, does intent matter?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It matters in a way. And also, it's like, how can you know someone's intent?
Yeah.
And
Because
how,
you just assume. I think intent is assumed because of all the things we've talked about, right? Because
yeah,
of the way we're brought up.
yeah, which is, yeah, exactly. And I think, like, there's something about a woman who's just embodying her own empowerment in her sexuality that's like, that is just attractive in general. Like, I think to all humans, right? It just is, it's like an aliveness.
Yeah.
It's like a radiance and an aliveness that is very different than going out and like seeking, one night stand or whatever. Not that there's even anything wrong with that. It's just the idea of like it's not about anyone else necessarily. It's just about like how do I feel the most alive in my own experience of my body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, what would you say? I know every once in a while do you get a weird echo from me?
Yeah, that's okay. You're good.
Isn't that's weird? But only when I say yeah. Anyway, I ask you only because you're the only XY on the call. Um, if you see a woman, right, who is clearly dressing for attention. I mean, it becomes obvious because as you said, an empowered woman looks empowered, feels empowered, vibrates empowered energy, right? So if you see a woman who is scantily clad and is clearly seeking for attention, do you react differently than a woman who is scantily clad but clearly empowered?
So speaking to intent, I'm gonna take it a little bit different here. I'm gonna start with what you're asking me. Being from Vegas, I don't even see people's clothes as meaningful at all. And
Immersion
yeah,
therapy. I'm
it's not
telling you, the
really.
more we do it,
This is not promoting Vegas in any way. Let's not make that too positive here. Um, so that's like in a normal everyday setting, walking down the street, going to the store, whatever. Like it doesn't impact me at all, one way or the other. However, to your point about intent, one thing I have experienced with online dating, and the part of the toxicity of online dating is it's a sales platform essentially, and you do have different approaches to it, and you have people who are trying to walk the line of showing everything that they can without actually crossing lines, versus people who are not, and also the content of profiles as such as well, and those come off way differently in those environments. So I think intent matters, and I think when you're in a situation where intent can be perceived in a meaningful way, or like Steven said, like looking for companionship, if that's what they're trying to attract, it's very helpful to have that judgment in place. But I wouldn't, like, on the street, a normal person, I wouldn't even blink.
And I feel like to what Stephen is saying, again, to end what Tam was saying, it's not as much about the dress as it is about the energy that the person puts off. And when Aaron describes the girls who do those things on dating sites, my first reaction is it doesn't feel empowered. Like, it doesn't feel empowered to do those things. So Tam, do you think that there is a situation where a woman does that? I'm obviously there could be, like, we can't talk about all women. Like, what do you feel when you think of the women that do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely on like a case by case basis, like I think there's some women who are really just looking for a partner for sex, and like that's their choice, and that's, if that's coming from their desire, like, again, it's not hurting me, it's not hurting anybody else, right? So like, why should we get to choose for, like, I don't think we get to choose for them. And then there's a different energy of like believing that that's where all of their worthiness and value comes from, right? And I think that's where it, I would say, when you were talking about how this idea of like sexualizing women, then like, is it empowering or is it like disempowering to like offer that space to our, like, even to like our children, or to like the girls and that are kind of like coming of age? Like, to me, it's very much about like, is it coming from a place of like, I love my body, I get to choose, this is what I want, right? Because I mean, we could take this conversation like in whole other areas too, right? Of like sex workers, like there's a whole like slew of sex workers who are like deeply empowered sexual women who are like, or men or humans who are like, this is what I want to do, and it's like comes from their sovereign choice. Like, okay, they should get to choose. But then there's like, unfortunately, this other layer of like, right, people taking advantage of each other's insecurities, and or just disempowering practices and those kind of things. So I don't think there's this like one answer to it. I think it's really such a personal thing that I don't think it's helpful to have these like kind of blanket statements about it.
Yeah, and it's good that you say that, because and when you talk about sex workers, my initial thought is the same thing. Like, there's no way in my head that there's an empowered sex worker. Like, an empowered in my body. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know it sounds ridiculous, people. But that's my first thought. I'm just telling you all the truth, what pops in my head. And it also makes me want to have that empowered sex worker on. So if you know any Amazonian people and or
that
I don't any Amazonians, but I might be able to hook you up on the other.
or empowered sex workers. Yeah, like, and I think there's a lot of people like me, I think, male and female, who, like, even if they do go to strip clubs and stuff, they don't, a lot of, I would say that there are a lot of men that go to strip clubs that don't see those women as they don't value the women they're watching. They don't look at them as empowered sexual beings, right? I would think in their head they probably even devalue them, even though they're the ones going to see them. And I could be generalizing again that this is coming from my middle class white girl perspective, raised in Vegas. So that's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, it seems like from a generalization perspective, that's probably the majority, but I personally know stories of people who are very empowered in both sides of that scenario, and who are really valuing that experience of almost like celebrating the body, celebrating sexuality, celebrating all of it. And so that, I mean, I think there's potential there for a really interesting paradigm shift.
Yes.
For sure. It brought to mind a thought, and I lost it now. But if it comes back to me, we'll let you know. But yeah, there's a few different stories that are kind of present for me. And one is a woman who was born in, I want to say it was in Iran. So when she was born and up until she was like a young teenager, her whole body was covered head to toe. And when she came to the U.S. as a refugee, as an immigrant, as an adult, she decided like she wanted to just do the opposite. And so she chose to work in a strip club, and she was like so empowered in her experience. She did a whole TEDx talk. I can share it with you later. It was really, really powerful. It was so much about like this reclamation, and like she's like, this is my body and I'm choosing to share it with you. I'm choosing this. And like you get the honor of enjoying my body.
I
And
just
so
got goosebumps.
Flip, right? It's a complete flip of the whole system.
Yeah, I've never, like, I would never have looked at it that way. And obviously, because of my perspective, because I wouldn't show my body in that way for that reason, which says, oh my gosh, which says way more about me than it says about them. That's what your judgments do, people. Your judgments say way more about you than they do about the other person. And I know this. And yet,
yeah, I mean, I think what's so beautiful and what I love so much about all of this is like, I think that when we're in this space of like inquiry and curiosity and just listening, and looking for stories that don't match our own, then we start like finding all of these other possibilities. And it's like, oh, I never thought like, right? Like I never would have thought about that or thought of it in that way. Like even as recently as like a couple years ago, until I like started to like open up this area of like inquiry, and then like finding these stories, and then noticing like, oh, you know, I only have such a limited experience in my five senses to like experience my life. But if I hear other people's stories, I've just like expanded. I think I've like told this analogy like multiple times today. And a dear friend of mine came up, like shared this frame with me. But it's like I can just expand exponentially my understanding of like what this whole life thing is about, because now it's like, and I think a lot of it comes into down to like trusting people with their own experience, like feels really important.
and believing it and coming with
Yeah.
an open enough heart to at least hear it, knowing you don't have to agree still.
Right. Match theirs. What if they're
Yeah.
not trying to convince you of anything except saying like, just believe me, this is my experience.
Yeah, because I would think like you're lying. Something in you, the old me, the me of 10 minutes ago is what we're talking about, would say would say you have to be lying. There's something deep in you that is wrong and you're just not willing to admit it. Yeah. So believe who they are and what they tell you.
Yeah. And I just remember the other thing that I was going to share, which is I interviewed a woman who's a sex therapist a few months ago, and her, perspective on it. She's like, any sex that is consensual and pleasurable is good. And so it was like mind blowing to me. And it seems relevant to this conversation as well, right? Because that's so the opposite of how I was taught about sex. And I think that it then really starts to trickle into all of these little kind of veins and capillaries of like where else those perspectives show up for us.
Yeah.
Like we have these like deep roots of like a core belief that I I think then plays out in all these other areas too. So we can get down to those and be like, oh, what do I actually believe about that now? It can start to shift everything.
Yes. Yes. I could go on and share more TMI about my sex beliefs, but um before we end, see, I just want to say that I love Steven, even though I've been hating on him in this episode. Usually he's on point, but he says, should sex in public be okay? And if not, where should the PDA red line be? I think that's an action more like you've crossed the touch boundary.
Are we talking about someone touching you, April?
I don't know.
I feel violated by the phrase touch boundary.
I think it's different. I think sex in public is very different than what you wear. And I think that again goes to one of the cores of the issue is what I wear does not necessarily have to do with sex.
Right.
Doesn't. Monique has a comment which I'm sure will be much more. I dress different going for a night out than I do visiting my daughter's school events. That's a good point as well.
Right. I think we all
Yeah.
do to a certain extent.
Yeah, you don't want to be Meredith on Casual Friday at work.
Yes. The Office reference. Where she
I haven't watched it, so I
Oh.
heard it was something I watched. I know.
I feel very differently about you now, Tam.
Can you accept me without judgment?
She pulls down her dress and shows her boobies. Yeah.
Because
Monique,
it's one garment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one. Monique, I love that question, and I think it would take many more minutes to go down deep into it. But I think I'm losing words now. It's so late. That the goodness of that question, though, is to start to think about the why. Like, why do I dress different going for a night out and to my daughter's school event? And who says I need to dress that way? And what do I feel about it? Just like Tam just taught us.
Oh, I love it.
So thank you so much, Tam. This was eye-opening. I hope I probably should go watch back episodes to remember my enlightened views. Because I wonder if I forget.
Agree. I did that today. I recorded an interview and then I listened back to it because I was like, I think I said some really helpful things there that I need to remember. So yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for joining us. And
please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all the things below. Help us get the videos out so we can get more questions, have more eyes here, and get more people opened up to these ideas. Next week, we're having a couple of guests talking about, and April's been working on this for a while, Satanism. So it's going to be a different...
Talk about eye-opening.
Yeah, it's gonna be an experience. So please check it out next Monday. We'll be here at, again, 7 p.m. Pacific time. And until then,